Hello, Trevor Simlinger here again from Progressive Coaching, and welcome to video session 5 in this series on limiting beliefs. Now, in the last video in the series, I gave you, I think it was the top 7 most common limiting beliefs that hold people back in life and cause them to self-sabotage. In today's session, I'm going to give you another 4 or 5 to kind of round out this list of the most common limiting beliefs. And what you can do is you can reflect on these common limiting beliefs and write down or record any that you feel may possibly be at play in your life. Because in subsequent videos in the series, I'm going to show you how to remove these blocks from your life, these internal blocks. So, without further ado, let's start with the first limiting belief. Okay, the first limiting belief for today, and it's number 8 because I'm continuing on from yesterday's session. And this is the belief that it's easier to avoid problems or perceived problems than facing them. And this is otherwise known as the Ostrich Strategy or sticking thy head in the sand. And I'm sure that most of us can relate to doing this at one stage or another in our lives. It can have various levels of effect, can't it? It depends if it's a big problem that we're really ignoring, or if we do this a lot, if it's a kind of continuous, if it's a habit, then this can really start to cause problems in our lives, as I'm sure you can appreciate. Jordan Peterson, I really like the metaphor he uses for this. He refers to problems as being like dragons, and dragons are always there. They're small and manageable. They're the size of your palm, unless you ignore them. Because dragons crave attention. And when you don't give them the attention that they desire, they get bigger and bigger and bigger to ensure that you give them that attention. And when they get huge and you still don't give them attention, then that's when big problems arise. Because then they start breathing fire out of their nose and flapping their big dragon wings around. And before you know it, they've caused a lot of destruction in multiple areas of one's life. The way to stop this from getting even more destructive is you have to give them the attention. They're not going to stop until you give them attention. So you give the dragons the attention and they slowly get smaller and smaller and smaller back to their manageable size. Okay, that's the metaphor. You can look it up that Jordan Peterson uses. He has a great video where he actually reads a children's book about a dragon doing just that, and uses this figuratively about the said topic, and it's really quite well done. So yeah, often our brains don't act in our best interest. Okay, we're trying to avoid pain, but what we're doing is actually compounding the pain. So when we ignore a problem, it doesn't go away. It just gets bigger. It compounds until we can't ignore it any longer. And if you currently, if this belief kind of resonates with you, if you feel like this may be at play in your life, write it down, because as I said, we're going to talk about how we can remove and change any limiting beliefs that are causing us to upset ourselves, basically, and also to stop us making progress towards our goals in life. Limiting belief number 9, and this is the notion that what we don't admit to ourselves can't hurt us. The ignorance is bliss philosophy of life. And to that, I would offer there is a very fine line between sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And being completely honest about what side of that line we spend most of our time is possibly one of the most important metacognitions that we could partake in. So do that now. I recommend doing that. And if you find out that you are operating out of this belief, if you do ignore a lot of your problems and pretend that they don't exist, write this belief down as a potential limiting belief, and we can do something about it in subsequent sessions. The past dictates the future. Okay, so this is limiting belief number 10, and it's a real tragedy, to be honest, because it leaves people really chained to their past. This is the belief that because something bad happened in the past, one can never go on to lead a really fulfilling and meaningful life. Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples of two people who experienced very, very bad things in the past, but who evidently didn't hold this belief. Okay, the first example is Nelson Mandela. Spent 30 years in prison, went on to become the president of South Africa. Every reason to be angered about his past injustices, but he chose a better belief. That's how important beliefs are. Another example, Oprah Winfrey was subjected to sexual abuse as a young child, evidently did not hold this belief that the past dictates the future. How do I know that? Because there's no way that these two people could go on to produce the results that they did if they held such a limiting belief. That's how powerful our beliefs ultimately are. It's incredible. So what also is incredible is some people absolutely have these massive, horrible, bad things happen to them in the past. Understandable. But being chained to them is optional, as hard as that is to hear. Okay? Problems are inevitable. Suffering, to the degree of suffering and acting in our own worst interest, is optional. Is possibly a belief that is self-serving as opposed to self-defeating. But that's up to you to decide, not for me to tell you. Just an idea. Other people, they have situations that aren't anywhere near as devastating as other people's problems. Maybe they had a bad conversation with someone or a bad situation, things like this, and they replay this in their mind over and over and over, and it affects the present. This thing that happened in the past is now affecting their present and their future. Okay, so have a play around with this belief, and if it is at play in your own life, write it down, and then you can do something about it. Bringing the unconscious to the conscious makes it real, then that's the first step, isn't it? Shining a light on it so that you can do something about it. Okay, limiting belief number 11. We're getting through them now. This is the belief that when things are tough and I'm under pressure and I'm facing challenges, I must be miserable and there's nothing I can do about it. So a little bit of societal conditioning there, a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is what limiting beliefs do. How does this work out for you? You prove your belief right. So it's very telling, the belief that a person operates out of, because you can't escape your beliefs. They are very showing in the emotions and the behaviors and ultimately the outcomes that one produces. A quote on this that I think I mentioned in the last section. I really love this quote, so I'll tell you it again. Problems are inevitable. Problems are inevitable, but the degree of suffering and acting in our own worst interest is optional. Have a little reflect on that quote, have a little reflect on this belief, and if you feel that you agree with this notion, write it down as a possible limiting belief if you do want to change it. Okay, so I've passed a lot of information on to you in the last couple of videos, but I've got one more limiting belief to share with you, and this is actually, I believe, the most important limiting belief, because this really does affect whether things stay the same or whether we actually start to make a shift and make improvements in areas of our life that we want to make improvements in. And this is the limiting belief that knowing is enough, that we don't actually have to do anything. It's enough just to know. And this sounds, I would argue, quite illogical when we spell it out like this. But how many people do you know that know what to do but don't actually follow through and do it? It's actually very common. I know I've fallen for this before. Have you? This is actually very important in the context of what we're talking about here, because we're talking about making some real changes, taking some action. But nothing will change. These limiting beliefs we will not be free of these limiting beliefs by merely shining the light on them, which is what we're just starting to do. We're starting to bring them from the unconscious to the conscious, so we can do something about them. But if we stop there, you know what changes? Bugger all. Okay, so it's all about the subsequent videos where I'm going to walk you through the process of how to actually change these limiting beliefs, how to eliminate these limiting beliefs and replace them with accurate, functional, self-empowering beliefs that lead you to where you want to go. Okay, but that's coming up in the next lot of videos. That's enough for one session. Thank you very much for your time. If you got any value out of this video at all, please give it a like and share it with other people so that they can also benefit from this content. And I look forward to seeing you in the next session. Cheers.